I went into Andor Season 2's 7th, 8th, and 9th episodes with a familiarity with the Ghorman Massacre. I knew that this was one of the final major atrocities committed by the Empire, an attack on largely civilians so egregious that it inspired Senator Mon Mothma to risk her life and her family's lives by directly calling out the Emperor's hand in it. Build-up for the actual event goes as far back as Season 1, where we hear bits and pieces via Mon Mothma and her colleagues and family of the Ghor continuing to be antagonized by the Empire for some unknown reason at the time, and even further back if you check out Star Wars Rebels Season 3. Even though we only get to feel the general aftermath of the massacre, this was clearly an incident that shook the very foundations of the galaxy and inspired a revolution against an empire. It's one thing to hear about the Ghorman Massacre, to hear about it through speeches and references from characters that weren't there. It's another thing to watch it happening. I knew what was going to happen, the characters knew what was going to happen, and my chest was tight nonetheless. I prepared for the worst case, and it still ended up being worse than my imagination prepared me for. Because it wasn't just the amount of death and destruction, it was the realization that this wasn't going to be a misunderstanding that unfortunately snowballed into a massacre. It wasn't going to be a shot going off that accidentally hits a protester and then all hell breaks loose. The callous, unfeeling terror inflicted on the Ghor was part of a calculated operation, with soldiers and operators that knew exactly what was coming. We all generally agree that the Empire is a malicious entity. It's an overarching, paranoid, evil government that makes its citizens live in a constant state of fear. At least I hope that's what we all agree on. But the Ghorman Massacre and its aftermath in the halls of the Galactic Senate and across the galaxy gives you a true example of what the heroes of our galaxy are fighting against so passionately. Behind the cool armor and the sleek uniforms lay an unfeeling, cold monster that was looking for an excuse to make your lives a living hell. So, as I wipe my tears after watching episodes 7, 8, and 9 and I get ready for the finale of Andor Season 2, I put forth a question to you. Do you understand Senator Mon Mothma's words? Senator Orin's words. Do you truly understand now how unnatural this evil empire is? Nemik's words constantly rang in my memory as I watched this devastation and horror on Ghorman. The Imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. As we've been watching Season 2 of Andor, the show has very deliberately been dropping crumbs, letting the audience know that Ghorman was of great interest to the Empire. We talked about this in a previous video. Krennic's equivalent of Ovanse Conference did a frighteningly good job painting what this interest in Ghorman meant for its people. A proud people that has the standing and status that a less developed world in the Outer Rim wouldn't command. The motivation? A mineral just beneath the surface of the planet called Calcite that director Orson Krennic very much needs for his super secret project that we all know what it is. Lip service is provided toward finding an alternative for the mineral to avoid the possibility of needing to forcibly remove 8 cities worth of people, 800,000 Ghormans, but it is increasingly clear that the Empire is unable to, or perhaps more likely, unwilling to, find a viable alternative substance or solution for the Death Star. The conversation shifts, uncomfortably for the audience at least, toward the concept of gouge mining, a technique that, if done, could destabilize the very core of the planet and render the entire world uninhabitable, an entire people and culture either killed or forcibly moved. Our world continues to serve as a reference for Star Wars. Hearing about how the operation is to go is one thing, but then we get introduced to Ghorman itself and the Ghor and their culture. We get attached to this world for 3 episodes, 4, 5, and 6, learning about the rich history of their people through the eyes of Cyril Karn of all people. The world, home to an underground resistance movement called the Ghorman Front, has been squeezed by the Empire for years now, really ever since the earliest days of the Empire. Senator Fang Zar was one of the delegation of 2000 along with Padme Amidala, Mon Mothma, and Bail Organa. He was the Senate representative of Cern Prime in the Cern sector of which Ghorman was a part. He was arrested shortly after the birth of the Empire for being an early opponent of Palpatine's efforts to achieve ultimate power. Months later, Tarkin landed a cruiser on top of Ghor protesters, taking the lives of 500 people. As time went by, and the Empire's grip tightened further, Ghorman found itself particularly vulnerable. The Empire took shots at Ghorman through various methods. Ghorman was a primarily single-product economy that imported almost everything they needed, so shipping lanes were disrupted heavily, putting extreme economic pressure on the world. Then the propaganda campaign against Ghorman, portraying the Ghorman people as arrogant, holier than thou, secluded like the Ghorman spider, unnecessarily aggressive against the small bean Imperial authority, attempting and succeeding to manufacture a narrative where whatever bad things happen to Ghorman are ultimately brought on by their own nature. Ghorman Senator Oren tries to walk tightropes as best he can to avoid the Emperor's wrath, but it's clearly not enough. The Empire wants the mineral. And despite claiming that they would look for an alternative, it's clear by 2 years before the Battle of Yavin that they really want bad luck Ghorman, because it's the easiest way and perhaps the only way they wanted to handle it from the very beginning. It's like a slow-moving train carrying dynamite heading directly for a powder keg. You know what's about to happen, and you know it's going to be bad, but seeing it as it happens is not something the audience or the people involved will ever forget. I reiterate, this was not a shot heard round the world situation where the British soldiers and the American colonists size each other up, a shot goes off and it kicks off a revolution largely accidentally. The show hammers this home. Every step in this massacre was calculated. Young recruits, possibly fresh out of the academy, were the security forces at the center of the Ghorman protest. They were inexperienced, easily trigger-happy, and terrified, which is specifically why they were chosen. Their leader, a scarred, dead-eyed Imperial Army captain named Kaido, a crisis specialist that was specifically brought in for Ghorman, second only to Dedra Miro, and even then it's clear that he had a mandate that supersedes even Miro's authority. As the crowd locks arms and begins to sing what I assume is the Ghorman national anthem, an Imperial sniper above the plaza filled with Ghormans that the Empire proceeded to then close off, took a shot. Not at a protester, but a green, young Imperial security officer, to justify the carnage that they wanted to inflict. This initiated what would become known as the Ghorman Massacre, which would go on to take the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of Ghor, shocking a galaxy full of people looking on. Others have given a play-by-play of the massacre itself, so I won't rehash what you likely already know. My focus here is primarily on the essence of this massacre. What does it mean? What does it symbolize? What does it represent? Just why? I say this so often, but it continues to be true, so it needs to continue being said. Star Wars' strength and what makes it special doesn't come from lightsaber choreography or cool blaster sounds or cool uniforms or outfits. At least it doesn't just come from that. The core of the Rebellion's struggle against the Empire, and by extension one of the major pillars of Star Wars itself, is its ability to tell stories that are very clearly inspired by real-world events and people in our own history. You know that old quote by George Santayana? Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Star Wars takes that quote and sprinkles it throughout some of its most powerful stories and sagas. Andor continues that Star Wars tradition as well. What do I see and recognize when I watch something like the Ghorman Massacre? When I hear, "Help us," is there no one who can help us? Echo throughout the final minutes of Episode 8 as Imperial stormtroopers and KX droids indiscriminately kill and maim the Ghor in the hundreds, in the thousands. What do I see? I see, as Mon Mothma put it in her speech of the century before the Imperial Senate, genocide. The forced removal of a group of people from their homes, manufacturing hatred for an entire group of people through media, premeditated firing into crowds of overwhelmingly unarmed protesters that were moments ago singing their world's national anthem, or at the very least a song associating heavily with Ghorman culture and history. I see genocide. These themes have been covered before in other Star Wars projects, and I'm grateful to every writer that made sure to try hammering home the terror that the Empire inflicts. But this moment in the season, and particularly these last 3 episodes, that's what it looks like. That's what genocide looks like. There are obviously some differences across history between the different genocides conducted, but there are also a lot of core similarities too. So when you hear cries of help, cries to pay attention to what you're seeing, when you comprehend the sheer malice that has to exist within the core of an ideology in order to conduct one, it's knee-buckling. It's devastating. And I will always appreciate Star Wars, and particularly Andor, for shedding more light light on that. It's awful, it's terrifying, and it's so real. You have an emotional reaction to it because you see it in the history books. You see it on your phones. You see governments and leaders dehumanizing entire peoples in an attempt to imply that the people these terrible things are happening to are somehow deserving of it. In your moments of witnessing genocide, you see the absolute worst of humanity, working to undo and ruin the lives of an entire people. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions. And it can be, as we've seen in Andor, a truly awful feeling. But you know what else can come out of this awful crime? A passion for life, an appreciation for all people, and a desire to never have this happen in our world again. Evil of that kind in this world is a daunting thing. The sheer magnitude of it all is staggering, but equally imposing is the movement against genocide, if enough of the people appalled have the strength and fortitude to call it out. Maybe politicians like Mon Mothma, ones that have the courage to call it what it is at the expense of their career or even their life, do exist in our own world. I'm not an expert on the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, I'm not an expert on Israel and Palestine's history or what Palestinians have been subjected to in Gaza, and I'm not an expert on the Holocaust. I don't claim to be an expert on any of these things. My goal when I study history is to learn as much as I can, to be as thoughtful as I can. My hope for humanity is for people to be able to live in peace and prosperity, without fear from bombs destroying entire homes, being forcibly removed from areas they've lived in all their lives, God forbid ever having to worry about losing entire families in a single year, month, day. When the Ghorman Massacre episodes aired, a lot of people on social media were debating over what genocide this took the most reference from. Let me be clear, it is a conversation worth having, because the Holocaust was such an industrial level of horror on the Jewish people that had never been seen before or since. And we know there are surface level parallels as well as parallels that require a little digging, such as with most events and people that Star Wars was inspired by. But with regards to the Ghorman Massacre, if you are familiar with or have learned about any of the unfortunately numerous genocides conducted in our history, this arc will impact you. That's why I believe this show and this arc are so important. It's giving you, as a member of the audience, a visual through the lens of Star Wars, what so many people deal with in history as well as today. All genocide is bad. You see parallels with multiple atrocities because the banality of evil, while the numbers vary, has a similar wavelength no matter where you look. Nemec's words ring true. The Imperial need for control is always desperate, and as a result it's always unnatural. The Empire or any other tyrannical government needs an unnaturally brutal hold on its people if its goal is something atrociously horrid like genocide. There is nothing natural about the systemic elimination of any group of people for any reason. It's evil, it's deranged, and should be spoken out against as often and as loudly as possible. These are the kinds of stories that Star Wars truly thrives telling. This is what I talk about when I say that Star Wars and history serve as excellent tools to tell those who watch and listen about what we need to remember, what we need to continue to guard against. The unnatural empire breaks and leaks when its people stand up and use their voices, show compassion to one another, look out for their communities. The last thing the Empire wanted to see was Mon Mothma calling what they did what it is, to a galaxy of people on primetime intergalactic television, because behind the facade of this stone-faced, ironclad, unbeatable empire that oppresses all who oppose it is a group of high-ranking men and women who underestimated the heart and the moral character of their citizens. This was one of the more difficult videos I've written for. It's a tough subject, and I want to reiterate, I am not an expert, but I do know that I love peace, and I love the idea of everyone living in peace, not having to worry about being treated a certain way because of their faith, their skin color, their gender, or sexual orientation, and I hope I at least conveyed that in this video. Thank you for watching, truly. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like and subscribe, as well as hit the bell icon so that you're among the first to see any new content like this in the future. As always, this is Mesa Windu out. Enjoy the rest of your day, love each other, and keep each other safe in this crazy world we live in. And always remember, the Force will be with you. Always.